Welcome to Knowledge 7, lesson number 8. Today we're going to be reading about working on the Transcontinental Railroad. We're going to learn about what that big word means, transcontinental. We'll break that word down here in just a little bit. But before we do, let's go through our vocab words. Remember, I will read the word, you repeat it after me. Sights, voyage, transport, create, encountered, territory, endurance. Again, we learned about the Pony Express. It started here in St. Joseph, Missouri. It traveled, again, look at a lot of these routes traveled in similar directions, but then they kind of veered off here south a little bit. Um, Again, the Pony Express was a quicker way to deliver mail to the people heading out west. Now, today we're going to learn about another quick mode of transportation. And what is this a picture of? Yeah, it's a train, or another word is locomotive. Again, before the locomotives were invented, people were traveling by wagons or by horseback along the trail. The locomotive sometimes is referred to as the iron horse because it was made of metal called iron, and it was powered, and it was powerful. It was kind of like a horse traveling, if not more powerful. Again, the heart of the locomotive was the steam engine, and that was like the same type of engine that Fulton used when he made the steamboat. But again, we learned about that the railroad only went to Missouri, and that's where it stopped. So we're going to learn about how the railroad was used back then. Now, we've heard stories about people in the railroad too. Remember, John Henry, he was working on the railroad. He kind of actually remember he helped build the Transcontinental Railroad, and he became a legend with that. And we also heard about Casey Jones, who drove a locomotive with his partner Sim Webb. So those are just some of the tales from Westward expansion that turned into these tall tales as well. After today's read aloud, you should be able to identify the main topic, working on the Transcontinental Railroad, and also show an understanding of the word convenient. My name is Michael, and this is a photo of my great grandfather, Ling Wei. He helped build the Transcontinental Railroad. Transcontinental is a pretty long word, but it's easy to understand if you split it into two parts. Let's repeat the word one more time. Transcontinental. The first part of the word, trans, which means across, and the second part of the word is continental. Yeah, remember there's the word continent in there. So my ancestors, Ling Wei, helped build a part of the railroad that goes across the continental United States, or from East Coast to West Coast. Again, continental just means a big piece of area of land. So trans means across, continental means area of land. So across an area of land, or a railroad that will go across the United States. So Ling Wei is Michael's ancestor because he was a member of Michael's family. He lived many years ago. Ling Wei began working on the railroad in 1863. By that time, there were many railroads in the United States, but they mostly went from the northeast to the southeast, or from the eastern cities like Baltimore to the Midwest cities like Omaha, Nebraska. It was cheaper and more comfortable and more convenient for people to travel by rail than to travel by canal or wagon, and it was faster too. Before the Transcontinental Railroad, people could only travel to the west by wagon or horse, or by boat on a river or a canal, and the going was slow. Because the iron horse, what's the iron horse again? Because the iron horse was cheaper and more comfortable and more convenient, many people thought it would be a great idea to have a railroad track that spanned the entire United States, or went from the eastern part all the way to the western part. My great grandfather, Ling Wei, helped to lay these tracks that connected settlers in the Midwest near the Missouri River to settlers in the Sacramento, California, all the way to the West Coast. How many people can say that about one of their ancestors? So again, they wanted to, uh, where the Missouri River ended, they wanted to take a railroad and build it all the way out west to Sacramento, California. It took two separate railroad companies to build the Transcontinental Railroad, the Union Pacific Railroad and the Central Pacific Railroad. The Union Pacific Railroad Company started from Omaha, Nebraska, where they laid their track going west. So they started here and went out west. The Central Pacific Railroad started building from San Francisco and headed out east and laid its track going east. At first, the two companies were competing against each other to see who could lay the most track. The U.S. government paid each company for every mile of track it laid, and both companies wanted to make a lot of money. In the end, the government told them they had to work together and join their tracks. Most of the laborers who laid the tracks for the Union Pacific Railroad were Irish immigrants. So most of the people on this side were Irish immigrants. My ancestor, Ling Wei, worked on the Central Pacific Railroad, like many other Chinese immigrants. Ling Wei settled in California. He and other Chinese immigrants, as well as other immigrants from all over the world, came to the United States because of the promise of gold and a better life. When people realized that the mountains of gold they had heard about were a myth, they had to find some other way to survive. What's a myth? So many Chinese immigrants worked on the western portion of the railroad, and the Irish immigrants worked on the eastern section. These workers laid track through the mountains and across the rivers and deserts in the United States. The Transcontinental Railroad took 6 years to build, and my great 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 grandfather, Ling Wei, kept journals for all of those years. Here's my favorite journal entry: May 10th, 1869, Promontory Point, Utah. Only 100 feet left to lay. That's what I thought of the first thing this morning. After several years of hard work, long hours, and little wages or low pay, 100 feet of track is all there is left to complete the Transcontinental Railroad today. Now it is hard to believe the work is complete. Despite the hardship I endured, I feel proud of my work. I think everyone today wanted to share in that last sentiment. Wherever I looked, people tried to lend a hand in finishing the track. Men that were just passing through Utah to deliver goods stopped to throw dirt on the ties or track or to drive a spike into the ground. Even the president of the Central Pacific and the Union Pacific Railroad took turns driving the last spike into the rails. It was a spike made of gold to mark the special occasion. They both missed on the first try, and all of us workers laughed. It's not as easy as we made it look. In fact, it was very difficult. Day in, day out, we swung those heavy hammers, driving the sharp spikes that held the wooden ties together into the solid ground. We carried heavy wooden ties in the hottest weather you can imagine. The worst days by far were those spent drilling tunnels into the Sierra Nevada mountains. These tunnels had to be big enough for locomotives and trains to pass through. First, the stones had to be blasted with dynamite. Then we went in and worked on shaping the tunnels. No matter how hard we worked and cut the stone, we would only move a few inches a day. I can still remember how tired my arms felt at the end of those days. It seemed like there was no end in sight. We'd never reach the other side of the mountain. Other days were filled with worry as we worked through lands where the Indian tribes were still powerful. They did not like us building through land that had been their home for many hundreds of years. I do not know how the railroad will change the life for them. For settlers and their families on the West Coast, I think the Transcontinental Railroad will change their lives a great deal. So, how do you think the railroad will change the lives of Native Americans? How do you think The railroad would change lives of settlers or the people heading out west. Trains will provide a faster and cheaper method of transportation for goods and foodstuffs. People on the East Coast will now be able to get goods from the West, and people on the West can now get goods from the East more easily. Travel for people who can afford the train will be more comfortable and convenient too. Of course, many people who cannot afford train tickets will still have to use their wagons for travel. As for us workers, we felt as much excitement as we did fatigue or exhaustion. We set the record for laying the most miles of track in one day. On that day, we worked from sunrise to sunset and laid 10 miles of track. Today, we finally finished our work. We've built a railroad that connects the east and the west coast of the United States. One day, people will talk about all the businessmen who dreamed of this and started the Union Pacific Railroad and Central Pacific Railroad companies. I hope they talk about my fellow workers and me, too, the men who built the railroad. So, what was the main topic of this railroad? Or what was the main topic of this read aloud? So, why did people decide to, if the main topic was building the Transcontinental Railroad, why did they decide to build that? Before the railroad, how did people travel out west? So why do you think? So we heard about these two railroad companies. They're building their railroads kind of towards each other. Why did were they forced to join their tracks? Yeah, it kind of saves time, saves money, lots of resources. In our read aloud, you heard the word convenient. I will say the word. You repeat it after me. Convenient. Convenient means close by or useful in accomplishing a certain task. Margie lives close to the grocery store, so it is convenient for her to go shopping whenever she needs. Can you name something in your life that is convenient and makes your life easier? So blank is convenient because it makes blink easier. So a water bottle is convenient because it makes drinking water a little bit easier. Anything for you that is convenient? Again, convenient means useful, goes by. If you add the suffix or the prefix in means not. So convenient turns into inconvenient, which means it's not useful or in accomplishing something. So we're going to use that in today's quick little word activity. I will read a uh, sentence and you're going to say that is convenient or that is inconvenient. We're going to use that prefix in. Living close enough to school to walk every day. That is convenient. Having your only pencil break before finishing your homework. That is inconvenient, not useful. Missing the bus and having to wait an hour for the next one. That is inconvenient. Having an older brother or sister who can help you with your homework. Ooh, that is convenient. Finding out that the book you wanted at the library is already checked out. That is inconvenient. Again, and then having an umbrella with you when it is raining. That is convenient. Again, we have one more read aloud to hear about with our Westward expansion. Stay tuned.